All right. All right. So sorry about that, guys. I was having trouble with the original stream setup. Apparently, it was waiting for a certain type of software. All right. So sorry about that. Here, let me check something real quick. Okay. Okay. I also have some scanning right now, so that's why I'm kind of distracted. All right. Okay. So sorry about that. I was having trouble with the software. Apparently, it was confused, or the editing, the live stream was confused. Okay, so here I just set up a whole new section altogether. All right, so welcome back everyone to Otto's Toy Factory. This one is going to be the reading of chapters 10 through 12, and then let's see, then I'll schedule for later on down the line for the next one. All right, I don't know what the heck I did wrong, but apparently something was wrong with the software. All right, here we go. I managed to fix it now, so let's go ahead and get going. All right, so Otto's Toy Factory, Chapter 10, Innocence versus Intuition. Crisis spread through town like a hungry contagion. Our account of what happened didn't help the situation at all. Of course, the adults concluded our telling of the tale as imagination. However, our experience still printed on the papers and gossiped through town, and were gossiped through town. Other kids in town learned of what happened through the gossip and created their own myth, telling stories and making up their own encounters to add further to the myth. All of which created a classic, creepy, and ironically true urban legend that there was an unseen monster in the woods taking children. Most kids became too afraid to go outdoors for anything. Not even the front yard felt safe. Parents kept extra close watch over their children. Parents kept an extra close watch over the children who were brave enough to venture outside those meager few feet, and for others no going outside, period. I landed in that part of the demographic. The park was closed, no playing, especially without adult supervision. There were roadblocks for traveling in and out of town, which would remain until school was in session. And children were especially forbidden from entering the woods and beyond the park. And unlike before, Max, Stephanie, and I especially had to comply. When our punishments were finally over, my remaining two friends were escorted by their parents, were escorted to my house by their parents, but we could only play inside. It was easy to get bored playing with the same toys in a room after a while, so we commonly followed it with an afternoon cartoon binge. It was while we were watching a rerun episode of Looney Tunes, Otto crossed my mind for the first time. I haven't thought of him or seen him in a while. In fact, I hadn't seen him since the morning Eddie went missing. After that evening, after we had dinner and my friends went. Then later that evening, after we had dinner, my friends went home. While laying in bed, I began to ponder the summer's most chilling events. Then the events that occurred in my old city followed menacingly. Though it was assumed they caught the people responsible, I couldn't resist but wonder if Otto planted the evidence to throw off my scent. I was getting suspicious of him around the time those things started happening, and the timeline made sense. The possibilities beyond those past events, the possibilities behind those past events. A part of me wanted to defend him. Made the part of me that wanted to defend him step into the light. All right. So the possibilities behind those past events did influence me, but the part of me that wanted to defend Otto stepped into the light. But how could he have done that? Bears don't know how to drive. Even so, how could he fit in the car anyway? My reasoning remained strong in its corner, ready to break down any plot holes or red herrings I didn't consider before. I braced myself as my logic engaged in a vivacious battle between my innocence. But he could have carried it. How far? And how did he do it without being seen? Hiding his giant frame would be difficult enough, let alone more. My innocence pleaded with the idea of how silly it could be that a bear could lift a car over its head like Hercules, let alone carry it for God knows how long to deliver it to its final destination. All of this could have been impossible to do without being seen, my innocence argued. However, my intuition tugged at the back of my mind like a small child begging a parent in the middle of a toy store, attempting to force me to see how something just wasn't right. There had to be something else going on right under my nose, something I refused to bring myself to see. It made me contemplate about telling Dad for the first time since we moved here. That part of me seriously argued with my waking self to tell someone about this. I even considered telling the police or Max's parents, Stephanie's parents, any adult who might listen to what I have to say, but they wouldn't believe me. No adult, either in this town, my old town, or even the entire country, would ever believe me. I'm a young child. And because of their real world logic, an adult would just scoff off the idea of a giant bear being behind all these atrocities and chalk all my babbling to the works of a child's overactive imagination. On the off chance they did believe me, they'd only pay attention to certain details, highlighting the ones they prefer and white out the more macabre ones, or even manipulate the facts to better suit their own hypothesis to what they think really happened. This was the only argument my logic could not dissuade, but it didn't give up. There are just too many discrepancies. A valid point. Otto had been gone for a bit pretty long, but the part of me who still wanted to believe that my friend was a good bear, who could never do such a thing, just kept proceeding. I mean, Otto said himself he wanted me to be happy. Why would he want to hurt my friends? If I accused him and ended our friendship, only to find out Otto was not the one behind it, I'd be alone again. But if he did take my friends, what if he did take my friends? With that, I reached an ignorant epiphany. He could have taken them to his factory. I forgot. He wanted to know their birthdays. Eddie and Daniel were taken on their birthdays. Of course. My innocence scored the winning blow as I threw the lingering doubt to the wind. He took them to the factory to be factory workers, and they're waiting for me with their toys. He must not have time to plan the parties and play with me at the same time. Our birthdays are too close together. He said parties take time and plan. He said parties take time and planning. He did ask when their birthdays were, after all. They probably haven't been found yet because they like it at Otto's toy factory. Maybe they were waiting for me there. Maybe they're waiting for me there. That has to be it. What else could he be doing there if he took them? My innocence had its case almost perfectly tied up in a bow. But my logic still had one good final point up its sleeve. A concrete question which still puzzled me how hard I tried to explain it. How could he know it was their birthdays when he took them? I never had the chance to tell them when they'd be. Coincidence? Or has he been following me? If so, how long? Worry returned with a vengeance as logic once again cloaked me with concern. But my love for my friend still lingered. Again, my naive purity magically reappeared and pinned logic to the mat once more. Maybe he's trying to make sure I was safe here, and Eddie's birthday was coincidentally the day I showed him the creek. He was probably watching me to make sure my friends and I got home safely, and he just happened to overhear what my friends told me. Perhaps Eddie was with him too. Maybe he told Otto. But that argument in my head ended, my childlike innocence winning. It was the best argument I could think of for myself. I still want to think that my best friend could never hurt my new friends or chase me out of the woods that day. I had to be strong. I had to be something. It had to be some that had to be something else. Another type of bear. It's not impossible. If Otto can skulk around at small cities without being spotted, it wouldn't be hard for another one to do the same. The only encounter the only counter my remaining intuition could provide was that I should consider telling my remaining friends that Otto would visit them. Like, the only counter my remaining intuition could provide was that I should consider telling my remaining friends that Otto would visit them, that he was going to take them to a special place and to not be afraid when he does. It may be a good idea that they won't be scared half to death when he approaches, especially with the population infected by putrid paranoia. I admit I nearly told Stephanie and Max once when we were playing, but then chose not to. My wonder providing me the defining excuse. That would spoil the surprise. I kept my secret to myself as always, and chose to continue with my naive, childlike dream, as Stephanie and Max's birthdays were swiftly approaching. We discussed what we would be doing for Stephanie's birthday, planned by their parents. We even agreed to make the day extra special for our missing companions. Not knowing the huge, mind-blowing awe that they would experience as their birthdays drew near. I figured with all the commotion going on with the adults, Stephanie couldn't meet Otto until the end of the party. I could still picture the image in my head now, seeing Stephanie and Max's eyes light up when they see their friends were okay, and with their favorite toys, eating candy and cake while we played at Otto's toy factory. The happy stuffed bear playing with us making toys with our giant bipedal teddy bear. The happy stuffed bear playing with us and making toys as our giant stuffed teddy bear becomes our teacher. A children's fantasy comes true. Until the morning of Stephanie's birthday, she went missing. Taken from her home in the middle of the night, Stephanie's parents entered her room to announce her big day, only to find it empty. Her bedroom window left wide open, her pink Disney princess-themed curtains fluttering in the breeze. There were no signs of a struggle, indicating that the perpetrator may have known Stephanie. I guess Otto met Stephanie sometime before her birthday and told Stephanie not to say anything to surprise Max. Then, as expected, Max disappeared on his birthday. His parents claimed to have sent him from their house to visit me, escorted by the same babysitter who looked after me all summer. With unfortunate luck, I became sick, so I couldn't go to Max's party. Max was forgiving and offered to come check on me later that day when the celebration was over. He told me he would bring some cake. They never arrived. His house was down the street from mine, so his parents thought for sure it would be safe to let him walk. The sitter even had a whistle and pepper spray in case anything went wrong, but obviously it wasn't enough. I figured Otto must have lured them away somehow, but I can't imagine the babysitter seeing Otto without at the very least eking out a scream. Otto can be pretty intimidating when you first lay eyes on him. Maybe he introduced himself? Maybe Max, like Stephanie, met Otto before and introduced them. I'd hope my friends would come back on my 8th birthday. I thought Otto would bring them the night before, but they never showed up. Instead, I spent the day alone with my father. Dad tried his best to make the most of it for my sake. Excuse me. Dad tried his best to make the most of the day for my sake. First, he took me to the park, which was deserted, so we had it all to ourselves. Dad watched as I played the day away. Then he took me to dinner at our local Denny's. He let me pick anything I wanted, you. For an appetizer, I got mozzarella sticks with ranch sauce, T-bone steak and shrimp with mac and cheese for the main course, with a chocolate milkshake to wash it down. Being as small as I was, I couldn't finish it. Leftovers in hand, Dad took me home where my waiting gifts and Digimon-themed birthday cake were. I tore at the wrapping paper and was greeted by one Digimon action figure after another. Dad even got me some trading cards for a starter deck and a cap with Agumon sewn on it. We ended the night by eating birthday cake. I remember wishing my friends were celebrating with me when I blew out the candles on my cake. Dessert was quiet and bittersweet before Dad broke the silence. Friends couldn't be here, Luke. It's okay, Dad. I reassured him, scraping at the layer of frosting on my plate. I was still amazed how he couldn't piece it together. Of course, the rest of the town wouldn't know, but how could he still remain so blissfully ignorant of what was going on? Luke? Yeah? When the school year starts, I don't want you talking to any adult who is not a teacher or a police officer. Not unless I'm around. Okay? He spoke with a soft voice, yet had a firm undertone with his request. I felt a tad upset that he would undermine me like this. Why? My irritability tipped its hand. Some people aren't as good as others, he explained. Remember what you learned about in first grade? Stranger danger? I raised a brow. Yes, Dad took another bite of dessert. I'm afraid that's not as accurate as it should have been. Stranger danger only protects you from a small percent of the population. The truth is, you must be on your toes almost always, because even the people you know could be dangerous. He informed sternly. I was confused. You mean I can't trust anyone? No, I'm just telling you to be cautious. If not, people could take advantage of you. That might have been what happened with your friends. Your friends might have been taken by strangers. Or aliens, I interrupted. Dad frowned slightly as his brow furrowed. What? He asked. Daniel always talked about aliens abducting Eddie. Dad didn't reply. He only took another bite of cake. Are they real? I asked. No, aliens are not real, he explained with certainty. What I'm trying to get at is your friends may have been taken by strangers, or they may have been taken by someone they knew. Probably a neighbor or a close friend of the family, Dad explained further. Just be careful who you make friends with. They might be more dangerous than you think. With Dad's final remark, I started to think of Otto once more, alongside all the events over the past 6 months. Is Dad talking about Otto? Did he finally figure out he was real? If so, how certain is he that Otto is dangerous? Even if he did see him, I somehow doubt he took the time to approach and get to know him. I always liked the irony behind not judging a book by its cover, yet the adults do it all the time. I knew what Dad was saying wasn't true. I couldn't have met Otto. He couldn't have met Otto. This has been a new tactic to try and discourage me from seeing my. There have been too many things to counter every point he made. How could people hurt the ones they love? Why would they want to hurt the ones they love? How could they do it without getting caught? All these questions reprogrammed my train of thought and sent it to a new destination. Maybe what happened with Mom may have affected him more than even I thought. He had been working really hard lately, and on top of this, he is a single parent. The stress must have been getting to him. The world can't be as bad as he was making it out to be. Finishing my cake, I put my Finishing my cake, I took my presents and went to my room. Dad gave me express permission to let me play for as long as I wanted. However, playing all day exhausted me, so after an hour, I eventually went to bed. All right, here we go. Next one. Chapter 11. Otto's Model T. I woke to pebbles bouncing off my windowsill. I turned to my clock. It was 11 a.m. I didn't have to get up. I knew it was him. Otto threw another rock at my window, then another, and another, and another. Sifting through the cocktail of exhaustion and grogginess, I finally remembered my initiation had finally come. I rolled out of bed and hastily tiptoed to my closet, picking out a green sweatshirt and denim jeans before throwing on my old red sneakers. Once finally dressed, I went to open my window when something made me stop in my tracks. Taped to the glass outside was a note gently blowing with the wind. A piece of paper with one a piece of paper with one was one-sided, and the piece of paper was one-sided and had one sloppy line written on it. Bring Bo. I looked down to find Otto waiting for me as usual in his usual spot at the base of the house. He waved to me. The grass below his feet glistened to the moonlight below him as the surrounding trees swayed submissively to the warm tempest, casting their shade like curtains over his figure. The giant toy bear extended his arms. Grabbing Bo by the ear, I climbed out the window frame and jumped into his arms. Otto paternally cradled me in his arms before gently placing me down. Then he hugged. Oh, yeah. Otto paternally cradled me in his arms, then hugged me before placing me ever so tenderly on my feet. I closed my eyes and took a warm night air before opening my eyes once more to meet. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath of warm night air before opening my eyes once more and met Otto's sockets. The giant bear looked down upon me, greeting with his trademark stitch-closed smile. I smiled back faintly. Dad's advice softly reverberated in my head. The creature was curious about my odd expression. The gregarious beast kinked his head to the side, as asking, "Something wrong?" I didn't answer. Instead, I rubbed my eyes and yawned. I knew I should be more excited about Dad's. I knew I should be more excited, but Dad's advice refused to leave my mind. An offering from a desperate, overbearing father as a last-ditch opportunity to go back to safety. I ignored my father's over-the-top paranoia. Otto understood my tiredness through his signature smile. Hold on, guys. Give me just a moment. Okay, here we go. Okay, sorry about that. After another moment of silence, the merry old bear reached his paw out, and I reached mine to take it. There we go. Let's see. I reached mine to take it. There we go. He recoiled and shook his head before putting his paw out once more. I realized what he meant by this gesture and gladly handed him my bunny. Otto handled my favorite toy with extra care as he memorized every inch of it. Then he reached down to his stomach, where he unzipped the zipper over his heart. He reached down to his chest, where he unzipped the zipper over his heart for the very first time. The bear's heart softly beat as he placed Bo inside over it and zipped him securely within. I couldn't help but smile as Otto picked me up and placed me on his back. He wheeled around to face the forest before dropping on all fours. Then, like a bullet from a gun, he took off, running through my backyard into the gleefully waiting forest. He ran and ran as if we were in a marathon. So fast, I thought so fast I was barely able to hang on to his fur. Otto's body undulated violently, causing me to spring up and down like a kid thrown around a bounce house. The tree trunk submissively stretched back as he sped, and as his speed picked up. Their branches snapped like cheap plastic under the furry machine's body. The soil below exploded as his feet impacted the roots. I looked behind my I looked behind me as the house shrunk and shrunk until its stern eyes were devoured by the tree line. With the eruption of joy that spread through my body created an aftershock of emotions I can't put words to, even to this day. I couldn't mask my excitement as I giggled and cheered. I was a hero riding atop a grand mythical creature awaiting our next awesome adventure. Before I knew it, we were miles outside of town, deep into the dense unknown. After a while longer, Otto finally slowed his pace until I could maintain a tighter grip. It wasn't until a few more miles had passed that did he slow to a stop. He paused. It was silent. Then he stood up. After another pause, he sniffed the air, like he sensed something I didn't. The air was icy and still. Apart from a few distant crunches and squeaks of tiny unseen nocturnal creatures, there was nothing. Otto continued observing the endless trees and mists intently for what seemed like an eternity. I don't know if there was anyone out there with us, and I still don't know to this day. But something happened, I think, but something happened. So I think Otto must have forgotten where we were temporarily and had to stop to reanalyze his bearings. After another moment, the silent bear carefully dropped back on all fours. Thankfully, instead of running, he trotted, his body and dinosaur-like tail lumbering behind gently enough so I could maintain a grip and enjoy the lovely evening scene around us. The lovely evening scene surrounding us. It seemed we fell into a very deep part of the forest that was too dense for any person to travel. Not even the most knowledgeably skilled hunter could possibly navigate through the wooded maze. Trees and thick, tall grass loomed over the environment like barriers, blocking the vision of the tallest man. Gawking at us from above was the full moon, smiling at us every chance it had from the devious, tattered canopy above. Surprisingly enough, there were plenty of plants, but no animals. The forest had become completely silent, not a single sign of fauna ever being in the area. It was a fantasy from your childhood dreams, just not the good ones. Hey, Otto, are you sure we're going the right way? I asked, one part to break the silence, the other to make sure the old bear knew what he was doing. Otto didn't answer. I trusted he knew where we were going. The unusually quiet bear continued his steady pace through the forgotten forest for miles and miles, until the trees lessened and the grass shrank. Eventually, the tree line opened to a small meadow hiding a secret pocket of history. Forged into the ground, an isolated dirt road dividing the grassland perfectly in two. A one-way dirt road, formerly covered by what I could only describe were thin tire tracks. Despite how old this road seemed to be, the divots in the dirt were pronounced enough to see under the prickly patches of moss, hidden enough for any unsuspecting hiker to trip over and break their ankle. The surround the mystery road stretched from end to end, disappearing into the dark ring of trees and misty unknown surrounding us at all sides. It was clear people used to use this road and had done so for a very long time, but for some reason they abandoned it, leaving it forgotten to time. Waiting on the road was an ancient four-door Model T with a faded light purple paint and a broken flat tire. Like a modern convertible, the prehistoric automobile had a segmented leather roof with a folded up at the back. The leather patched up very poorly, and the bony bars between them were dented and rusted at points where they pierced through. Fastened to the back of the vehicle was a Fastened to the back of the vehicle, under the batwing roof, a giant metal key, similar to the ones you'd see on a wind-up Tinker toy. The two mufflers beneath jutted out one after the other like twisted chimneys made of tarnished segments of brass. The windshield was more like an overglorified pane glass window, and that it was being generous. The glass was paper thin. Chunks were missing, and everywhere else was dotted with spiderweb cracks. The same type of damage can be seen on the two lanterns below its disfigured wire-thin frame. Its headlights were the only part of it that seemed to work properly, with the exception of the right headlight being almost completely ripped off, dangling by wires that cast a sinister light and joined the menacing dangling only by wires as it cast its sinister light and joined the menacing trees in a regnant seance with the chanting wind. The rear view mirrors were crooked, casting the ghostly moon in my eyes. Years of rust ate through the metal doors and its front hood, with a grid bent forward, revealing its rusty red engine hidden inside. The tires were jet black. Apologies. Just a second. Something's going on here. Tires. The tires were jet black, driver's side, and clearly very well worn. However, they weren't torn or broken, except for the flat one under the driver's side, which lay with a half-ass patching job and three broken sticks made to hold together the wooden rim. They look like monster-sized bike tires with thick metal spikes jutting out the center, rusted and pointy. You could get cut just by stroking your finger against them, and the tetanus would probably shoot through your body like venom from a snake. The bent front axle barely held up at the front end of the demonic machine, forcing it to lean towards us, as if beckoning for our souls. The car was much larger than ones typically made, being the size of a large van. Compared to Otto, however, it was a clown car, and a very worrisome one at that. Made from so many improvised parts, it seemed Otto built it himself. Otto slowed to a stop before rearing upright and placing me back on my feet. The vehicle leaned away from the evening fog, patiently waiting. Otto opened the back door and, like a chauffeur for a celebrity, gestured gracefully for me to climb inside. The door opened in the opposite direction, and that I was used to seeing, releasing a blanket of dust and rot, which sounded a cough, which coughed a hazy surprise. I coughed in response. The interior of the vehicle was even worse than the exterior. What were once pristine velvet crimson red seats were now torn with bundles of rusty springs jutting in every direction like demented monuments. Like the wheels, one could get instant tetanus from just the smallest scratch. The few gashes repaired were done so in an absurdly crude fashion, using fishing wire in place of traditional thread. Some of the fishing hooks were used to produce the stitching, joined the springs in their contorted welcoming committee. The front seat had a huge hole carved into the driver's side, as well as most of the passenger side. Sheets of various dark-colored fabric stretched over the open wound, acting as makeshift bandages to compensate for the lazy operation. There another town of hooks and springs greeted me. Thanks to the hole in the front bench, I could see the dashboard. It was your typical standard dashboard given for the car's model, made from wood and decorated with half a dozen speedometers, caked with an inch of dust, and the glass was foggy and busted with as the lanterns outside. Descending from the metal rings of the speedometers were miniature V-shaped streams of blackened mildew, staining the wood and causing the dashboard to decay. The dials housed by the glass were warped in very unnatural ways for inanimate objects. Their pointers melted in place, unable to move up or down. Not that it would have mattered. The scales had no numbers or ticks for them to point to. The steering wheel was average for your normal person to operate, too small for Otto's massive paws. There was only one single stick shift to adjust the vehicle's speed. The handle was shaped like a bear's head and absolutely massive. Only Otto could clearly use it. It was hard to imagine it moving from place to place due to the layers of oxidation painted on the shaft. The stick bent away from the steering wheel, forming a triangular divot, disappearing under the dashboard. I think there may have been more bells and whistles underneath, but it was too dark, I couldn't tell. Here, give me just a second, guys. I'm going to take a small break. I'll be right back. Alright, so sorry about that. Just took a small break. Also, I wanted to rest my vocal cords. I imagine you didn't hear that. Okay, sorry. I wanted to take a small break. I also wanted to rest my vocal cords. Just a second. Alright. What was that? Yeah, here we go. All right, here we go. I was so unnerved that I didn't want to go in. Subconsciously, I backed away from the door, but Otto's paw grimly cushioned my back and nudged me inside. He didn't shove me, but he applied just enough pressure to push me forward. Reluctantly, I slipped into the back seat, being careful not to cut myself with the hooks. I thought it was I thought it was okay until something sharp. I thought I was okay until something sharp prodded my arm. Watching me blankly, Otto poked me again. He wanted me to go further inside. I shook my head. I didn't want to get cut by the metal fingers reaching out for my vulnerable skin. Or worse, the vehicle coming to life to devour me. Otto poked me a third and final time, this one followed by a foreboding growl resonating deep within his throat. I froze. That was so out of character for him that it actually scared me. I almost felt like I was prey if I didn't listen. Cautiously, I shimmied my way over the decay-coated traps and secured my place at the passenger side. I looked to the door on my side where I saw no handles or window rollers, only holes indicating where they would be, and the lock permanently secured, probably for years, going off the dense coat of rust. I couldn't see over the seat in front of me, but I wouldn't be surprised if the same could be said for the front passenger door. My door was too high for me to jump out without my legs and arms being cut up like construction paper. Sure, I could have just ran through the hole carved through the front bench seat, but the driver's side door was also shut, and it would take too much time to try and unlock or climb over before being seized. Not to mention the obvious obstacles between them. I felt trapped. Otto grunted, causing me to whip my gaze back to him. He was just watching me closely, as if he was expecting me to try and run. Our gazes remained locked on each other for another minute or so before the bear reached his left claws in his chest, unzipped his pocket, and returned Bo to me. Having Bo back did make me feel a little at ease, but I was still unsure of how to respond to the situation. Otto closed the door and gradually walked behind the car where the key waited. The giant bear gripped the key with both paws and forcefully cranked it with all of his might. The giant toy key turned slowly with a thunderous cranking noise that oscillated through the dead air. With each painful crank, the engine roared violently like a hellish lawnmower as a menacing Model T inched itself taller and taller, until, with one final crank, the car boomed heavily, jostling seats and nearly knocking me to my side. It was ready. Otto made his way around the driver's side and took his rightful place behind the wheel. His tail slithered to the back seat and curled around my tiny frame like a snake, lifting me off the seat and hugging me tightly as the all too familiar scent of his fur inched its way up my nose. He pressed a button next to the wheel, and the Model T roared to life. The machine shivered fiercely, unhappy to have been woken up. The roof unfurled instinctively from the back seat and stretched over our heads, wrapping around Otto's shoulders as it reached the front. Its silver handles screwed themselves perfectly in place within the metal framing of the windshield. The windows rolled themselves up gradually, sealing in place with the metal framing of the windshield. No, sealing in place with the metal framing. The windows rolled themselves. Oh no, wait, I already read that. Sealing into place when they connected with the top. That's one. The windows rolled themselves up gradually, sealing into place once they connected with the top. The driver's side doors locked themselves on cue. Its mufflers coughed black smog mixed with fiery sparks the fiery sparks of a waking dragon. Otto began messing around underneath the dashboard. I presume flipping switches because I saw the rearview mirrors adjusting themselves until they faced me. Same thing for the dash mirror. Once everything was in their proper place, Otto shifted the car in gear and we started off. The Model T jerked before sputtering into the milky white unknown ahead, shivering, coughing, and jolting all the way. The bent front axle caused the car to limp aggressively through the terrain, forcing the interior to lurch side to side. I would have bounced off the walls and seats and got sliced up like a paper doll if it wasn't for Otto acting as my seatbelt. I watched out the obscured windows of the vehicle to the meadow before the scene was ended by the dark trees of the forest. Our journey seemed to take hours. I'm sure we were only a few minutes in. I proceeded to observe the outdoors to pass the time, only greeted by virtually the same rows and rows of trees guarding against the existence of modern society. A little longer into the ride, Otto fiddled around under the dashboard again. I heard the flipping of switches, and eventually he turned on a radio. Yes, a radio. Within seconds, a supple yet eerie melody filled the air with its enchanting rhythm. It was low at first, and then grew in volume. The music was rugged and old-timey, like it was being played from a phonograph. The audio was disjointed. It was hard to make out the words of the singer. From what I could hear, the singing didn't quite match the music. Closer to an offbeat sing-along than anything else. The song itself had to have been very old, like it was sung back in the 30s or earlier. The beat was chipper and repetitive, reaching highs and lows like it was the background for some black and white cartoon. It was faint and made me uncomfortable. I wouldn't hear that music again until years later. Trying not to focus on the song anymore, I unwillingly distracted myself by observing the sights to see if anything had changed. We couldn't have been going that far. Otto needed time to take me back home before Dad wakes up. But the outside remained the same. So instead, I tried to find something in the car to do, or at least focus on while we continued to our destination. I thought about playing with Bo to relax myself, but Otto's tail prevented me from moving an inch. I tried finding something new in the car to look at, but everything was already observed and practically memorized. Still keeping a cool head, I continued to search the car for anything I could find to reassure myself until I caught Otto's gaze from the mirror. He gave me a half smile from the murky, cracked glass, and it made me feel a little better and reestablish some trust. He knows what he's doing. He has to. He'll bring me home on time. It shouldn't be much longer. I convinced myself, remaining as calm as I could. It was claustrophobic, but Otto's tail was securing me, so providing me with some comfort. Almost too much comfort. I took a deep breath as tiredness suddenly showed its generous face. From the combination of exhaustion aided by the rocking of the vehicle, I actually managed to fall back asleep, snugly coiled in Otto's tail, Bo snugly coiled in my arms. Chapter 12, Thomasville. I slept for what I could imagine was most of the way. I don't recall if I ever dreamed once that night, just blackness. Inky, silent blackness, which was eventually interrupted by the sound of claws pulling against fabric. When I woke, it was still nighttime. I had no idea how long I had been sleeping. It could have been at least a few minutes. It could have been a few hours. I can't say. Otto had driven us literally out into the middle of nowhere, with nothing but thick blackened foliage at either side of the road. The path was much narrower and darker than before I fell asleep. The previous flora I saw made me tremble, but the state of these newly introduced plants made me outright terrified. Surrounding the car were dead trees, not pine, more like ash or oak, with broken branches and steep holes embedded in their bodies. Standing just inches from the doors, their trunks swimming in an ocean of misty whiteness. Their leafless silhouettes loomed over the prehistoric Model T. Their jagged claws Their jagged branches clawed at the patched leather roof, trying to tear their way in to get to me. Every once in a while, a twig or branch lunged out from the whiteness and whipped at the windows before scraping away helplessly as the car waddled onward. Before long, for a long time, that was it. Same as before, only creepier. I began to fear what the next stage of hell the woods beheld. I thought of how I thought we were left to drive around this medieval forest forever until thankfully the monstrous trees lessened and we entered into a downhill clearing, far larger than the meadow we saw, I presume, hours earlier. However, instead of just a single dirt road, it housed a small town. An abandoned small town influenced by early city development, bordered with even more twisted trees and blanketed with the same ghostly mist as the unknown road. As the car limped its way downhill, the town grew and grew until it enclosed us within its wooden and concrete architectures. Concrete architectures. Okay, there we go. All right. With our only source of light other than the car lanterns being the full moon above, it took a minute until the fog lifted just enough to make out what was in front of us. The first sign to be seen clearly was an old weather-beaten one. No, an old weather-beaten wooden one, reading, "Welcome to Thomasville." Only the T, H, and B were long gone, leaving behind dark outlines stained on the rotting pale blue timber, giving the illusion of the name read Almas Ill. Almas Ill. I looked around in confusion as the ghostly white fog drifted around us, glowing above the shadowy grass. Glowing above the shadowy grass. The car puttered for a few more minutes until, for some unknown reason, Otto decided it was time to stop. He pulled the car over to the closest abandoned building with the visible parking spots that I presume he knew wouldn't fall over. He even took time to parallel park, almost perfectly alongside the curb. Once it was all set, did he finally unwrap his tail from my tiny frame. Otto stepped out of the decaying Model T and stepped back to where I was. He opened the door with the same manner he did for me when I went in, a chauffeur for a celebrity. Nervously, I gripped Bo to my side and made my way out as carefully as I went in. However, instead of letting me jump down, Otto picked me up with both paws and placed me on the ground. He even waved me into the air from side to side before doing so, kind of like how a proud parent would get, kind of like a proud parent giving their child an airplane ride. It was weird, but I sloughed off the unusual detail. It actually made me laugh a little, and made me feel better as his weird change in attitude was gone. He was the happy, cheerful bear I always knew him to be. Like what happened when we got in the car never happened at all. Instead, I found myself once again gazing over the atmosphere, only to be greeted by the same eerie environment as in the car. The fog's wispy form blanketing my feet as the moist evening breeze gently caressed my hands. However, instead of trees, it was an endless structure of partially demolished houses and old school streetlights. I looked around the abandoned town until my eyes rested on a street sign just behind Otto. According to the sign, we were on the corner of First and Main. Main spelt with an E. Otto lifted me up and placed me on his back once more, and he merrily trotted past the sign to the milky mist and the uncharted city. For about 20 more minutes or so, all I could see were old company buildings and waist-high grass decorating them. As the two of us continued down the main path, I proceeded to examine the run-down town. The roads appeared to be mostly dirt, with what little pavement was laid down was cracked and buckled with lots of grass protruding through. The town appeared to have been built in the early to mid 20th century. Every decaying house in every neighborhood we passed was had broken windows with formerly white picket fences, all left in advanced stages of decay, capturing a long forgotten age of a once quiet, cheerful town. A place where you would imagine your great grandfather or grandmother would spend their youths. I could almost see the children of that era running through the streets even to this day, kicking cans, playing marbles, or riding bikes without a care in the world. The boys were the boys going out to the woods on campy neighborhood adventures, and the girls played with their dolls in their yards. Their fathers going to work and mothers staying at home doing household cleaning. Standing shamefully over these forgotten neighborhoods were a meager handful of early skyscrapers sprinkled here and there. Not all skyscrapers appeared to have been whole at one time. Some looked as if they had been halted during construction. Lining the roads were giant clumps of what used to be all-American metal cars, most of them resembling different types of Model Ts. They were all broken and blanketed in sheets made from at least 50 shades of rust, rendering their once shiny, flawless forms into now useless, almost unrecognizable hunks of metal and lumber. The tires were completely deflated, with some entirely detached from their bodies, resting comfortably on the pavement. Street after street revealed the same outcome. It was almost as if this small city was on its way into becoming a bustling metropolis. This town was clearly about to enter the height of its era before something went horribly wrong. After about 40 minutes of walking, we entered what I could best describe as After about 40 minutes of walking, we entered in what I could best describe what was the town square. As there were a few indications of old-timey pharmacies, car lots, and small grocery stores, Otto stopped his trotting and took me off his back, placing me on the ground, and he then stood on his hind legs. And we proceeded to walk from there. Once we made it just outside of town square, Otto turned left and beckoned for me to follow down yet another unknown road. This road was darker. This road was darker than the others and only housed one building. We walked for about another couple brief moments until Otto put out his paw, stopping me dead in my tracks. Then he placed a claw under my chin and guided my gaze up to the main attraction. Otto lifted his other hand to bid me welcome to Otto's Toy Factory. Go. All right. So, there we are. So that will conclude Otto's Toy Factory chapters 10 through 12. I will go ahead and read another round Friday. Friday, I will be reading chapters, I will be reading chapter 13 through 15. Currently, I only have 16 chapters up, so perhaps I will get to chapter 16 next round. Yeah, because there are going to be 4, so perhaps I'll be able to do 4 chapters next round. All right. And then after that, I will keep posting my story as, let's see, it's all finished. I just need to finish editing it. All right. So this will conclude the reading of Otto's Toy Factory chapters 10 through 12. And I will post links to the website as usual, as well as my Facebook and everything like that. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a good day. Thank you. Next scheduling should be on for Friday. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.